morning. December 29, already. A new year lurking just around the corner there. And speaking of which, how are your New Year's Eve resolutions coming? So it was a mixed bag. There was a bit of frustration, a bit of humor, a bit of, yeah, that's my feeling too, all of that. Who started this New Year's thing anyway? Have you ever wondered about that? What was that? Ah. I'm going to stop asking questions. Anyway, I researched a bit and I discovered about 4,000 years ago, the Babylonians began a tradition of making promises to their gods to do better in order to win their favor. And when I read that, I thought, boy, as Christians, I'm glad we don't have to do that. Christ has given us favor in every area. Anyway, this tradition that they started evolved and it spread around the world, but it still has that core idea of welcoming a new year, a fresh, clean slate, a way to start over with hope and resolve of becoming better at this, that, or the other thing. But where do you start with that? Like there's so much that can be improved. In my research, I came across a guy who had developed quite, well, I say a rather novel approach to getting his New Year's resolutions lined up. He said he just lets his wife write out the resolutions for him. He says she knows better than he does what he needs to stop doing, what he needs to start doing, how he needs to shape up. So on New Year's Eve, he says, I just get my list from her, stick it in my pocket, and it's great. I don't even have to think about it. Win-win. His wife's happy because he's taking such a keen interest in self-improvement, and he's happy because he doesn't have to do anything. So everybody's happy. But this kind of defeats the whole purpose of New Year's resolutions, don't you think? Which obviously can cover quite a wide range of self-improvement. So just for interest's sake, the other day, I asked Dr. Google, what were some of the top New Year's resolutions for 2024, this year, just passing? The top ones included these resolutions: exercise more, lose weight, eat healthier. Nothing startling there. So I got to thinking, I wonder what they were last year. So I looked it up. 3 of the most popular resolutions for 2023 were exercising more, eating healthier, and losing weight. Imagine that. So I thought, well, what about 2022? Number 1 was lose weight. Number 2 was eat healthier. And number 3 was exercise more. And then I thought, okay, I don't even want to know what they were for 2021. So I just took a peek. And yeah, no surprises there. In no particular order, the top 3 or 4, out of the top 3 or 4, we had losing weight, eating healthier, and exercising more. And the funny thing is, those were basically my favorite New Year's resolutions for years. I never kept them, of course, but by the looks of it, neither did anyone else. And the fact is, every New Year's Eve around the world, millions of resolutions are made toward a healthier, more satisfying, a better life. Exercise more, spend less, be kinder, and then they're broken within a few days or weeks. It's crazy. Year after year, often the same resolutions, none of which last very long, and certainly not long enough to make a difference in your life. And by the way, that is why the second Friday in January is known as Quitter's Day. Yeah, this is real. Just 2 weeks into the new year, Quitter's Day. That's when the enthusiasm for these New Year's resolutions made New Year's Eve starts to wear off, and when a lot of people just throw in the towel on the whole thing. Quitter's Day. I was talking to a gal from our church family about this recently. She said, yeah, most New Year's resolutions are fully abandoned about a month after that, mid-February. And you know, the stats bear that out. I checked it out. People tend to give up on their resolutions anywhere from within 1 to 6 weeks of starting out. And by mid-February, it's pretty much over for another year. Nice to get that out of the way, eh? Then we get on with our life. By the way, in my research, I found that New Year's resolutions in Italy are called buoni propositi, which means literally good intentions. And I thought that's perfect. Good intentions. I've heard somewhere there's a road somewhere paved with them. If the person beside you isn't laughing, you can explain that to them after church. So the bottom line here is that year after year, making these New Year's resolutions just does not work. And an interesting thing about all these resolutions is that we, like Frank Sinatra, could say, I did it my way. Now, the problem with doing the New Year's resolutions my way is that it has a lot of me, and myself, and I in it. Self, pride, overconfidence, no planning, negative self-talk, unmotivated, self-doubt, inconsistent, giving up too easily, not ready to change, etc., etc. That's a lot of me, myself, and I in there, just mucking around. Reminds me of a famous singer. I heard this story. She's sitting at a table, it's between sets. A guy comes up, introduces himself, joins her. They start talking. She starts going on and on about what she's done, what she's doing, what she's going to do, her accomplishments, her awards, and so on. Finally, she says, well, that's enough about me. Let's talk about you. What do you think of my latest single? Hard to get rid of that, isn't it? But getting back to our own celebrations, I want you to just picture this. And you all have done this. You've made your New Year's resolutions to lose weight, get in shape, whatever, with earnestness and conviction. This is the year it's going to happen. And by now, you're into the second week in January. Uh-oh. You're starting to feel a little vulnerable. But by luck, you just happen to catch a couple of New Year's experts on TV or online, and they say the way to achieve inner peace and full satisfaction is to finish things you've started. And you just know they're not talking about that exercise routine you have in the bedroom and the dumbbells in the back room. So you start looking around the house for things that you've started and you haven't finished. Possibly you'll get to work on those. And sure enough, you come across that quarter bag of all-dressed potato chips from Christmas, still good. And there's that half chocolate bar. You were wondering where that got to. And oh, look, some cookies and a few cheesies. And yes, a half liter of chocolate milk, just enough to wash that all down. So you finish all that stuff off. And in doing so, by the way, you've just put on about half the weight you lost on your 9 or 10-day New Year's resolution program. But man, you feel good. There's that sense of inner fullness and satisfaction. You just don't get that eating celery sticks, right? So that's what I call doing it my way. And it's the way we've been tackling this New Year's resolution bit for who knows how long. I recall reading about a psychologist in California years ago whose definition of insanity was, and you've heard this, to keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And you know, when you think about it, that's just crazy. I believe if we want a different result, we need to stop doing the same thing. Right? Maybe we should try doing something different. A new year, a new approach kind of thing. And just a couple of days ago, I took a couple of steps in that very direction. I toyed with the idea of resolving not to make any New Year's resolutions this year, except for that one. And I got quite excited about it. I thought this could be the first year I actually fulfill a New Year's resolution. But that wouldn't get me very far on that journey to self-improvement. So, what about taking a run at something just totally opposite to my way, such as doing it God's way? What might that look like? Well, in fact, there is a biblical principle that just might do the trick. I feel funny drinking this because years ago in Toronto, I had a buddy who was a cab driver there, and he had this little glass of water up on his dash there with a little container. I said, "That's so cool you got that, man." He says, "That's vodka." Yeah. Fortunately, he was a 4 a.m. to 4 p.m. shift, so, well, he's drunk by noon, right? But nobody got hurt. Did I just say that? This biblical principle, it's the biblical principle of sowing and reaping. And it's all through the Bible. And it applies to everyone, regardless of your age. And no matter what you believe, sowing and reaping. It's a law of life, and it affects every part of our lives, family, work, pleasure, name it. And I know you've heard this before. You reap what you sow. But you know, it follows that if you don't sow anything, you won't reap anything. Kind of goes without saying, eh? Except for the guy I read about who spent all day on the couch, just lying on the couch all day, day after day. Finally, his frustrated wife asked him, says, "So how long are you going to just lie there?" He looks up at her and he says, as long as it takes. Yeah, that was her reaction too. What do you say to that? As long as it takes. I'd say he's ignoring a key biblical principle for a satisfying, fulfilling, and even possibly a prosperous life. Here's the word of God concerning this. It's in Galatians 6:7. Do not be deceived. God will not be mocked. For whatever a person sows, he will reap. So may I suggest a new definition of insanity, and that is expecting to reap a harvest without sowing anything. And I'd add, if you don't sow, you will weep. I made that up last night. They didn't like it, Norm. If you don't sow, you will weep. It's not that good. So the biblical rule is that you reap what you sow, both good and bad, by the way. I remember a kid knew in grade 6 or 7. He was always looking for a fight. He spent all recess moving around the yards and the grounds there, trying to pick a fight with somebody. So guess who got into lots of fights? him, sow and reap, which he usually lost, by the way. I don't know what became of him. Maybe he took up boxing, who knows. But I'll never forget him saying what he wanted on his gravestone. Big letters. What are you looking at? Can you imagine? You're walking through a graveyard and you see that on a gravestone. What are you looking at? Sow and reap. For good or bad, the principle is what you sow is what you reap. If you sow this, you get this. If you sow that, you get that. Every time. But you know, that's only half the story. There's an important part B here. We find it in the Apostle Paul's letter to the Corinthians. 2 Corinthians 9:6. Paul writes, under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, but this I say, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously. And this is a key point here. We got to remember this. You reap in proportion to what you sow. It's not just reap what you sow, but in proportion to what you sow. Sow a little bit, reap a little bit. Sow a lot, reap a lot. That's how it works. Now, we also have a record in Luke's gospel of Jesus expanding on this sowing and reaping principle. It's not all just about gardens and grain fields. Luke 6:31, Jesus said, just as you want others to do for you, do the same for them. Right there, about a dozen little one-syllable words stating a most profound and powerful truth. Just as you want others to do for you, do the same for them. Over time, of course, Jesus' phraseology there got transferred this way, reversed. Words were pared down, and it became what we now call the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Short and sweet. Sow and reap. And then comes this incredible promise of Jesus, building and elaborating on the concept of sowing and reaping. You got to catch this one. Luke 6:38. Give, and it will be given to you, a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. The poured into your lap really struck me as I was thinking about this last night. There's an old saying that something disappears when you stand up. It's your lap. Everybody's a lap. I'm the only one here without a lap right now. You're sitting down, you have a lap. That suggests when Jesus says this is poured into your lap, you aren't doing anything. Somebody else is pouring this into your lap. Isn't that great? Amen. Hallelujah. God pouring it into your lap. It's a cosmic law. With the measure you use to give, it will be given back to you in that measure. So where does this principle work? Well, it works in the physical realm. It's a cosmic law. It works in the spiritual realm, in the economic realm, the personal realm, or works in any realm you can think of, or any circumstance or situation. Works everywhere. As you give, you will get. Hey, do you want to test this right now? I take that as a yes. Just real quick, turn to your neighbor and smile. Great. Okay, now the other side. Big smile. Sweet. So you smiled. What did you get back? A smile. Of course. Sow a smile, reap a smile. Sow a big smile, reap a big smile. Now, do the same with a handshake. Just shake hands with the person beside you. So you shook their hand. What did you get? A handshake. If you shake a hand, you get a handshake right back. This is awesome. Okay, now we're on a roll. I want you to crack open your purse or wallet and take out a $20 bill. No, I'm just kidding. I think some person's doing it over there. No, just kidding. Don't do that. But you get my point. First the sowing, then the reaping. Whatever it is you sow, sooner or later, it comes back to you. You don't even have to think about it. In fact, it's better if you don't think about it. Just focus on sowing the seeds. Somebody moved my water. Oh, there's secret in here, eh? What's he got in there? Where were we? Oh, focusing on the seeds. We're focusing. December 29th. How could we apply this timeless principle to our relationships, our families, our marriages, co-workers, people at the church, anywhere? Well, I'd start off by asking, what do you think you might be lacking? Or what is something that you think you'd like to have more of? It can be anything. Like Rodney Dangerfield wanted more respect. I don't know if you remember him. I don't get no respect. Tug at his tie. Looking back to his childhood, he said, no respect. I played hide and seek, they wouldn't even look for me. When I was a kid, I got no respect. I worked in a pet store, people kept asking the manager, how big do I get? Get your wife to explain that to you. Here's a gem of his. Last week, I told my psychiatrist, I keep thinking about suicide. He told me, from now on, you have to pay in advance. No respect. But my point here is this, if you feel you're not getting respect, start giving it to others. You can sow respect by showing approval, honor, admiration to others and to things that they've done. If you do that, you'll begin to reap a harvest of respect. You want appreciation? Sow it far and wide. You want affection? Sow it lavishly. Now, sometimes we may feel, I don't have anything to give. Sometimes things are really piling up on us and we might be thinking, oh man, not now. When things get better for me, I'll start doing that. The problem with the when things get better for me approach is that it's all backwards. It's wanting the harvest without the sowing. We need to start sowing whatever is missing in our lives. Even if it's only in very small ways, even one tiny seed at a time, if that's all you got, the principle is valid. Here's a real life example of how that can work. I heard of a pastor who had visited a lady who had missed the last couple Sundays of his church. Turns out she was a little depressed, didn't feel like going out, no energy. But during his visit, the pastor noticed the house was filled with flowers. So obviously, she enjoyed caring for the flowers. So he made a very tender, gentle suggestion to her. He said, why not give a nice bouquet of flowers to newcomers at the church? Well, in no time at all, this lady was giving flowers not just to newcomers, but to newlyweds, new babies, and she was joyful. Her life was full of life and energy. Same lady. Friends, listen, this is God's way. She sowed love and joy to others, and in doing so, she reaped a harvest of greater joy and love. It works. Why not try this in some of your relationships? There's always something you can give. Feeling down? Pray for somebody. And you find almost instantly, and you've experienced this, I know, you have an energy coming back in your life, more energy almost instantly. Did you prepare an extra large meal? Not the best question to ask a couple of days after Christmas, but if you do that, pack up a little TV dinner and take it to someone who you know would really appreciate it. Maybe somebody who's living alone. Do you happen to know a new Christian? If you have an extra Bible at home, give it to them. Or maybe even buy them a new Bible. By the way, if you do this, you can know for sure that they're going to be started off on the right version of the Bible, because you picked it. This give and receive principle, it's universal. It works in all realms of life, including commerce and business. Have you noticed that the Jewish nation, Israel, is often associated with riches and wealth? You know why that is? Yeah, neither do I. I was kind of hoping you'd know. But as I think about it, I do know something. For century after long century, God spoke to the Israelites through his prophets. And they were immersed in God's precepts, his promises governing life, family, business. They saw and heard them in teachings and prayer meetings and in the synagogue. They read them in their schools, their studies, their private devotions. This was their life. I'm going to give you an example of one that they actually would have seen or heard. Possibly, well, this is about 3,000 years old. Proverbs 11, 24, 25 was actually written 1,000 years before Christ was born. Here it is. One person gives freely, yet gains more. Another withholds what is right, only to become poor. And this, give freely, and you will prosper. Help others, and you will gain more for yourself. The Israelites heard these truths year after year. They were repeated to them generation after generation. This last one, for 3,000 years, they've been hearing this. And you'd think over these long periods of time, something's going to stick, wouldn't you? But you know, you don't have to be Jewish for these enduring principles to work. I recall visiting a church in another city years ago with my wife. The pastor spoke of a friend, Earl, quite briefly. He just introduced him. He was visiting, he was out of town, who happened to be very successful and evidently very generous. True story, I was there. The youth pastor was doing announcements that morning. I remember thinking at the time, don't ever let a youth pastor do the announcements. Nothing personal, Jordan. And a short interview with Earl. Now, Earl came on the stage, very well dressed, sharp suit, tie, looked great. During the interview, the youth pastor just casually mentioned, he said that he liked Earl's tie. So what's Earl do? He whips off the tie and gives it to the youth pastor. Here, it's yours, take it. He insisted on that. I was not a believer, as I said, but that encounter made quite an impression on me, and I never forgot it. And I remember thinking at the time, I like his shoes. Some give freely and still get richer, while others are stingy but grow poorer. This is both an observation and it's a fact of life. We have an upcoming new year. A couple of days might be a good time for us to look at our lives, to see if we're reaping what we truly want, and are we planting the seeds that will grow into more of what we desire. And we could ask, what can I offer to other people? Time, resources, energy, helps, support, encouragement, even money. Oh, and speaking of finances, in my research, looking at the last few years, I saw a new New Year's resolution has appeared in just the last couple of years. Improving my finances, increasing my savings. And this is not surprising, given the rise of costs of just about everything. So then for all these folks, yes, and for us too, we can all ask, well, what does God have to say about that? Does God have any precepts or advice specifically related to finances, money? Well, the biblical Proverbs again, listen to this, Proverbs 3, 9 and 10. God gave this proverb to the Israelites about 3,000 years ago when many, or most of them, were farmers. Here it is. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your crops, and then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. This is amazing. First, the precept, the rule or the teaching, honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of your crops. And next comes the promise. And then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. This is God making this promise. Basically, it's sowing and reaping again, yes. But here, it is sowing specifically to God and his work. So can you see in that how giving, honoring the Lord with our wealth, is a vital part of our worship of the one true God? By the way, for what it's worth, I started doing this before I was a Christian. Yeah, crazy. Here's how that came about. Marlene had been saved, born again, and I sometimes went to church with her, but I was not saved. And I can remember trying to discourage her from giving too much of our money to the church. Meanwhile, in my own personal search for truth, capital T, truth, I came across a little book on this subject. I read it, and it made perfect sense to me. So one day, we're just sitting at home, quiet day. I turned to Marlene and I said, honey, I think we need to start giving regularly to the church. So after Marlene picked herself up off the floor, it was quite a shock, we drove out to the church and got a box of giving envelopes. Honor the Lord with your wealth, and your barns will overflow. And I can tell you, God proved this maxim to Marlene and me, big time. Before we had started to give like this, we were always up and down with finances, often worried about money for one reason or 6 others. But when I started to give generously and freely of my income to the church, more and more opportunities just opened up for me, for my consulting work, my training workshops, my freelance writing, speech writing. In 1991, we quit our jobs in Victoria, trusting God now, seeing his faith, moved to Regina for me to go to seminary as a brand new Christian, born again Christian, and Marlene would stay at home, cover off the home front. I had a lot of extra work that I was able to do with Marlene at home, so I was going to be a homekeeper here during those seminary years, contract work. And with that extra work, it took me 4 years to earn a 3-year degree, but I was able to graduate with no debt. And shortly after that, I began to serve as Pastor Dorm at Pineview Alliance Church in Grande Cache, Alberta, which, as I used to say, is not the end of the world, but you can see it from there. So the bottom line here is that, I guess we could say, instead of asking, what am I getting? I believe we need to start asking more of, what am I giving to my employer, to my staff, to my customers, my friends, my family, and to God? Give a little, be given a little. Give a lot, be given a lot, flowing through you to bless others. Here's a fun fact. If God can get it through you, he'll get it to you. If God can get it through you to others, he can get it to you. So, how do you start to make all this a regular part of your life? You simply make a conscious, deliberate decision to do it. And yeah, start small. Start with something you actually can do. Start to sow the seeds of whatever you feel is lacking in your life, or whatever it is you want more of. Respect, resources, love, help, support, encouragement, whatever it is. What do you want more of? Start sowing that. Now, as the worship team comes up, I want us to have just a brief private moment to ask ourselves, what's something I can give to someone right now or soon without expecting anything in return? Just take a moment to think of that. And in the meantime, Happy New Year, and may the Lord bless you richly. Thank you.